Her doctor snapped photos, but they weren't for her medical record. They were proof for a dangerous criminal empire that she was still alive, a witness they needed to silence. Trapped in a hospital with her healer as her executioner, her only hope is a risky alliance. If you're new here, subscribe and comment your location. Now, let's begin. You're not taking those for my file, are you? The words, laced with a tremor she couldn't suppress, seemed to hang in the sterile air, condensing the fear that had been curdling in Sarah's stomach for days. Dr. Evans's smile, usually a beacon of reassuring, polished charm, didn't falter, but it changed. The warmth drained from it, leaving behind the cold, perfect symmetry of a porcelain mask. His phone, pointed at the lurid purple and yellow bruise spreading across her ribcage, lowered a fraction of an inch. "Of course they're for your file, Sarah," he said, his voice a smooth, practiced balm. "We need to document the healing process. It's standard procedure." But it wasn't. She knew it in the way his thumb had tapped the screen a little too deliberately, not a quick clinical snap, but a series of careful compositional angles. She knew it in the way his eyes, a disarmingly warm hazel, had flickered away from her face and towards the door, as if expecting someone. She knew it because 2 days ago she'd seen him in the hallway, his white coat a stark contrast to the weathered black leather worn by the man he was with. A man with a grizzled beard and a Hell's Angels death's head patch sewn onto his cut. A president named Marcus Thorne. They hadn't spoken. They hadn't needed to. A single, knowing nod had passed between the surgeon and the outlaw, a silent transaction that had turned Sarah's blood to ice. Her accident hadn't been an accident. The out-of-control car that had mounted the curb, missing her by inches but throwing her against a brick wall, had been a warning. A message she'd been too naive to understand until now. She'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time. A casual witness to a package changing hands in a shadowy alley behind her favorite coffee shop. She hadn't thought anything of it until the car, and until now. Dr. Evans finished his examination, his touch suddenly feeling invasive, not healing. "You're making excellent progress," he said, his tone light, but his eyes were assessing her in a new way. She was no longer a patient, she was a problem, a loose end. The moment the door sighed shut behind him, Sarah pushed herself up, a sharp gasp of pain escaping her lips. The hospital room, once a sanctuary, had become a gilded cage. The beeping of the heart monitor was no longer a comforting rhythm of life, but a ticking clock. The photos weren't for her file. They were proof of life for the club, proof that the liability, the witness, was still breathing, and conveniently located in a place where another tragic medical complication could be so easily arranged. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed its way up her throat. She was trapped, a bird with a broken wing in a cage surrounded by cats. Her only lifeline was the call button, but who would she be calling? The nurse who was probably just following Dr. Evans's orders? The orderly who might be on Thorne's payroll? Her thoughts were spiraling into a black hole of terror when the door swung open again. She flinched, expecting Evans, expecting Thorne, expecting the end. But it was just Leo. Leo, her physical therapist, a man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. He was tall and lanky, with messy brown hair that constantly fell into his eyes in a perpetual expression of cynical amusement, as if the entire world was a badly written joke. "All right, Miss Sarah," he drawled, not even looking at her as he wheeled in a walker. "Time to see if you remember how to be a biped. Try not to fall on your face, my back's not what it used to be." Under any other circumstances, his grumpy demeanor would have annoyed her. Now it was a bizarre anchor to reality. He was real. He was normal. Wasn't he? He helped her swing her legs over the side of the bed, his hands firm and impersonal. Every movement was fire in her ribs, a stark reminder of her vulnerability. "You know," he muttered, steadying her as she stood on trembling legs. Most people try to get out of the hospital, not find new and exciting ways to prolong their stay. I heard you refused the extra-strength painkillers, going for the Masochist of the Year award. She took a shaky step, the cold floor seeping through her grippy socks. I need to keep a clear head, she whispered, her voice strained. Leo paused, finally looking at her. His eyes, a startling shade of blue-green, scanned her face. You look like you haven't slept. And not just the hospital bed is uncomfortable kind of not slept. The seeing ghosts kind. It was the opening, a tiny, fragile crack in the wall of her isolation. Could she trust him? She had no choice. She was out of options. What if the ghosts are real? She said, her voice barely audible. What if the person who's supposed to be helping you is actually waiting for you to be well enough to kill you? She expected him to laugh, to roll his eyes and tell her it was the pain meds talking. Instead, he grew very still. His grip on her arm tightened almost imperceptibly. He guided her to sit in the room's single uncomfortable armchair, then pulled up a stool sitting so close their knees almost touched. The air between them crackled, charged with a sudden, unexpected intensity. Start from the beginning, he said, his voice low and devoid of all its earlier sarcasm. And don't leave anything out. So she did. The words tumbled out in a rushed, terrified whisper. The alley, the package, the accident, the knowing nod between Dr. Evans and Marcus Thorne, the photos. She watched his face, searching for any sign of disbelief, of dismissal. She saw none. He just listened, his gaze fixed on hers, absorbing every horrifying detail. When she finished, she was trembling, tears of fear and relief welling in her eyes. You think I'm crazy? Leo let out a long, slow breath. Crazy? No. Unlucky? Hell, yes. He ran a hand through his messy hair. I've worked here for 5 years. Dr. Evans is a rock star, donates to charity, sits on the board, dates a news anchor. He's also the guy they call when certain kinds of people show up in the ER with certain kinds of injuries. The kind the police don't get notified about. I always thought he was just being discreet for his wealthy, connected clients. This is something else entirely. Hope, fragile and terrifying, bloomed in her chest. You believe me? Let's just say I've seen Evans and Thorne together more than once. Never thought much of it until now. A doctor to the bikers. And they're cleaner. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Okay, first rule, you're not safe here, but you can't just run. You've got broken ribs, a concussion, and the muscle tone of a cooked noodle. Second rule, we play their game. You are the perfect, compliant, dopey patient. You take the pills they offer, but you don't swallow them. You cheerfully do your exercises. You make them think you're no threat. And then what? Sarah asked, her heart hammering against her bruised ribs. A slow, grim smile touched Leo's lips. It transformed his face, stripping away the cynicism to reveal a core of hardened steel. And then we use their own system against them. We need proof, something that links Evans to Thorne in a way that can't be explained away. Your word against theirs is nothing. We need a smoking gun. The plan was terrifying in its simplicity. Over the next few days, Sarah played her part with an Oscar-worthy performance. She smiled dopily at the nurses after taking her sedatives, which she secretly tucked into her cheek and later flushed. She praised Dr. Evans's brilliance, asking him innocent questions about his work that made him preen and, she hoped, lower his guard. Meanwhile, Leo became her eyes and ears. He was a ghost in the hospital's machinery, moving with an unassuming ease that belied his sharp intelligence. He'd casually linger near the nurses' station, picking up snippets of conversation. He memorized the codes Evans used to access secure areas. He was her shield, his presence a constant grounding force in the swirling maelstrom of her fear. Their connection deepened, forged in the white-hot fire of shared danger. During their physical therapy sessions, what had been clinical and impersonal became charged with a palpable electric tension. One afternoon, he was guiding her through a series of gentle stretches, his hands on her waist, her back against his chest. The scent of him, clean laundry and faint spearmint, was a stark contrast to the antiseptic hospital smell. She could feel the solid strength of him, a wall against the world that wanted her dead. "Easy," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear, sending a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with pain. "You're holding your breath. You have to breathe through the discomfort." She let out a shaky exhale, leaning back into him for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. It was an admission of trust, of something more. His hands tightened on her waist, and for a heartbeat, the world outside the room, the threats, the fear, simply ceased to exist. There was only his steady presence, the frantic beating of her heart, and the unspoken promise hanging between them. "Leo," she whispered. He slowly turned her to face him. His usual mask of cynicism was gone, replaced by a raw, open intensity that stole the air from her lungs. He cupped her face, his thumb gently stroking the fading bruise on her cheekbone. "I'm not going to let anything happen to you, Sarah," he said, his voice low and fierce. I let something bad happen to someone once before. I was too late. I won't be too late this time." It was a confession, a glimpse into the pain that fueled his sarcasm. Before she could respond, he leaned in, and his lips met hers. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate, hungry, a collision of two people clinging to a life raft in a stormy sea. It was a promise and a prayer, filled with all the fear and hope they couldn't put into words. Her hands came up, tangling in his hair, pulling him closer, ignoring the protest of her ribs. In that moment, they weren't a patient and a therapist. They were allies, conspirators, their fates irrevocably intertwined. The sound of a cart rattling past the door broke them apart. They stood breathless, foreheads touching, the air crackling around them. "We have to be careful," he breathed, his voice husky. "I don't care," she replied, her own voice trembling with a newfound strength. "That's the first time I've felt alive since I got here." The stakes were now impossibly higher. This was no longer just about survival. It was about fighting for a future she was only just beginning to dare imagine. The break they needed came 2 days later. Leo, while fetching supplies, managed to slip a tiny, discreet audio recorder he'd bought from a spy shop downtown into the pot of a fake plant in Evans's private consultation office, a room adjacent to the main surgical floor. It was a reckless, dangerous move, but it was their only shot. That evening, during a late shift when the hospital was quiet, they huddled together in Sarah's room, a single earbud shared between them as they listened to the playback. Most of it was mundane, discussions of schedules, a complaint about hospital administration. Then a new voice, gravelly and laced with authority, filled their ears. "Marcus Thorne. Needs to be dealt with, Doc. She's a loose thread. You said the accident would take care of it." Evan's voice, smooth as silk, replied, "It was a warning, Marcus. A messy death in public attracts attention. A post-operative pulmonary embolism, however, is a tragic but statistically plausible event. It just requires the right conditions and the right moment. She's still too weak. It would look suspicious. We wait. The club doesn't like waiting. We've held off on a major shipment because of this. Every day she breathes is a day we're exposed." "Patience," Evan soothed. "The photos confirmed she's contained. She's not going anywhere. I'm monitoring her closely. When the time is right, I'll administer the cocktail myself. It will be quiet. It will be clean, just like always." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Leo's hand found hers, his grip like a vice. They had it. They had the proof. But it also confirmed their worst fears. Her death warrant had been signed, and Evans was the executioner, waiting for the perfect medical moment to strike. "We have to go. Now," Leo whispered, his eyes wide with urgency. But as he said it, the door to her room opened without a knock. Dr. Evans stood there, his white coat immaculate, a pleasant smile on his face. But his eyes were cold, sharp, and they went directly to the single earbud in Leo's ear, the wire trailing down to the player hidden in his palm. "Evening, Sarah." "Leo," he said, his voice deceptively calm. "I was just doing my rounds. Is everything all right in here? You both look tense." The air in the room turned to solid ice. Leo's hand closed around the recorder, slipping it into his pocket in a movement so fast it was almost invisible. But Evans's gaze followed the action, his smile tightening. "Just a bit of pain, doctor," Sarah stammered, forcing a weak smile. "Leo was just helping me take my mind off it." "Was he?" Evans took a step into the room, his presence filling the space, suffocating them. How very dedicated of him. "You know, Leo, I've noticed you spending a lot of extra time with Ms. Sarah, far beyond the requirements of her physical therapy plan." He took another step, his eyes flicking between them, a predator assessing his prey. He knew. Maybe not everything, but he knew something was wrong. "It's almost as if," Evans continued, his voice dropping to a conversational, chilling tone, "the two of you are conspiring about something." He was between them and the door. The call button was on the other side of the bed. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird beating itself to death against its cage. Leo shifted his weight slightly, putting his body between her and the doctor. "Just doing my job, Doc," Leo said, his voice carefully neutral, but Sarah could feel the tension coiling in him. "Of course you are," Evans purred, "and part of your job is to ensure patient safety, which is why I'm sure you'll understand that, effective immediately, I'm reassigning Sarah's case. I'll be taking a more hands-on approach to her recovery from now on." The threat was veiled in professional jargon, but it was unmistakable. The pulmonary embolism had just been moved to the top of the schedule. Evans's eyes lingered on Sarah, and for a single horrifying second, the polished mask slipped completely, revealing the cold, ruthless killer beneath. "Get some rest, Sarah. You're going to need your strength." He turned and left, the door clicking shut with a sound of terrifying finality. Leo was at the door in an instant, locking it. He turned to her, his face pale but set with a grim determination. "That's it. We're out of time. The game's over." "He's going to come back," Sarah whispered, her body trembling uncontrollably. "He's going to come back and kill me." "Not if we kill him first," Leo said, his voice deadly serious. He rushed to the window. They were on the 3rd floor, too high to jump. "We can't go out the door. He'll have someone watching." "So what do we do?" Panic was closing in, black spots dancing at the edge of her vision. Leo's eyes scanned the room, landing on the empty laundry cart one of the aides had left in the corner. A grim, desperate plan formed in his eyes. "We don't run from the hospital. We run through it." He helped her out of bed, his movements swift and sure. "We need to get to the parking garage. I have my car. If we can get to the police with that recording..." "But how? They'll be watching every exit." "There's a service elevator the orderlies use for moving bodies. I mean patients," he corrected himself quickly. But the slip sent a fresh wave of terror through her. "It goes down to the basement level, which connects to the garage. It's our best shot." He bundled her into a spare set of scrubs he pulled from the cart, pulling the cap low over her face. "Keep your head down. Don't make eye contact with anyone." With a deep breath, he unlocked the door and peered out. The hallway was clear for now. He pushed her in the laundry cart, piling dirty linens on top of her. The world became a dark, stifling tunnel of stale cotton and the faint metallic smell of blood. She could hear everything amplified. The squeak of Leo's shoes on the linoleum, the distant pages over the intercom, the beat of her own terrified heart. The cart moved, jostling her bruised body. She heard Leo greet someone, his voice artificially cheerful. "Just the usual load. This place is a mess tonight." A grunt in response. A security guard? An orderly on Thorne's payroll? She held her breath, praying the trembling in her limbs wasn't shaking the entire cart. After an eternity, the cart stopped. She heard the ping of an elevator, the doors sliding open. Leo pushed her inside. The doors slid shut, and the elevator began its descent. He pulled the linens off her. "We're in. Basement level next." But as the elevator doors opened onto the second floor to allow a pair of orderlies on, Sarah's blood ran cold. Standing just beyond them, talking quietly into his phone, was Marcus Thorne. His eyes, cold and flat, swept over the elevator, passing over Leo and the laundry cart without a flicker of recognition. The orderlies got off. The doors began to close. Thorne's gaze snapped back, locking for a split second with Sarah's, visible just over the edge of the cart. There was no surprise in his eyes, only a cold, predatory satisfaction. He'd seen her. He spoke into his phone. His voice a low growl she could just make out. "They're in the service elevator, heading down. Cut them off at the garage." The doors slid shut. "He saw me," she gasped, scrambling out of the cart. Leo's face was a mask of fury and fear. He slammed the stop button on the elevator. It jerked to a halt between floors, the emergency lights flickering on with a dull hum. "Plan B," he said, his chest heaving. He pried open the elevator's service hatch in the ceiling. "Up, now!" He boosted her up, her ribs screaming in protest as she pulled herself into the dark, greasy shaft. He followed, pulling himself up with a grunt of effort just as they heard the elevator doors being forced open from below, voices shouting. They were in the narrow space above the elevator car, the cables stretching up into impenetrable darkness. It was a dead end. "Now what?" she whispered, the despair finally overwhelming her. They were trapped. There was no way out. Leo shone his phone's flashlight around, the beam illuminating a service ladder bolted to the concrete wall, leading up to a heavy-looking door. "Maintenance access to the roof," he said. "It might be alarmed, but it's our only shot." They climbed, Sarah moving slowly, each rung a fresh agony. Leo was right behind her, a steadying presence. He reached past her and shoved against the door. With a groan of protest, it swung open, spilling cold night air into the shaft. They stumbled out onto the roof of the hospital. The city lights sprawled out before them, a panorama of freedom that felt cruelly out of reach. The wind whipped at their scrubs, a cold, cleansing slap after the stifling air inside. But their freedom was short-lived. The door to the roof burst open again. Dr. Evans emerged, followed by two hulking men in cuts, Hell's Angels. Evans wasn't smiling anymore. In his hand, he held not a scalpel, but a sleek, silenced pistol. "It really is a shame, Sarah," Evans said, his voice carrying easily over the wind. "You were a remarkable patient. So much spirit. But all good things must come to an end." Leo stepped in front of Sarah, shielding her with his body. "It's over, Evans. We have a recording of you and Thorne. We've already sent it to someone." Evans laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "A desperate bluff. Do you really think I'd let you walk out of here with something like that? This ends now. The official story will be a tragic double suicide. A disturbed patient and the therapist who became too emotionally involved." He raised the gun. Sarah clutched Leo's arm, her eyes fixed on the barrel. This was it. After everything, it ended here on a cold rooftop. But Leo stood his ground, his voice surprisingly calm. "You should have checked your office more carefully, Doc. The recorder wasn't the only thing I planted. There's also a camera, live streaming to a cloud server. And I've got a friend at the FBI who owes me a favor. He's been watching this whole thing. Right, Paul?" He said the last part loudly, clearly, not to Evans, but to the empty air. For a moment, nothing happened. Evans's finger tightened on the trigger, a smirk of victory on his lips. A for effort, Leo, truly. Then from the streets below, a new sound rose, the distinct wailing chorus of police sirens, dozens of them growing rapidly closer. Red and blue lights began to paint the surrounding buildings, flashing across the rooftop. Evans's smirk vanished. He and the two bikers looked over the edge, their confidence shattered. In that moment of distraction, Leo moved. He wasn't a fighter, but he was fast and desperate. He lunged, not for the gun, but for Evans's arm, slamming it against the roof's parapet. The gun went off with a muffled foot, the bullet ricocheting harmlessly off a ventilation unit. One of the bikers charged, but Leo, with a strength born of pure adrenaline, shoved Evans into him, sending them both stumbling. The roof access door flew open again. This time it wasn't more bikers, it was a SWAT team, armored and armed, pouring onto the roof. FBI, everyone down on the ground. Now! The scene descended into controlled chaos. The two bikers were quickly subdued. Evans, his white coat now dirty and torn, was forced to his knees, his hands zip-tied behind his back. The cold professional killer was gone, replaced by a furious, defeated man. As an agent led a trembling Sarah away, she looked back. Leo was standing by the parapet, watching as Evans was read his rights. Their eyes met across the roof. There were no words. There didn't need to be. The look they shared held everything: the terror, the hope, the desperate fight, and the promise of something that had been born in the darkest of places and had survived to see the dawn. The aftermath was a whirlwind of statements, investigations, and media frenzy. Dr. Alistair Evans, celebrated surgeon, was revealed as a key asset for the Hells Angels, a cleaner who had helped them eliminate at least 3 other potential witnesses over the years. Marcus Thorne and several high-ranking members of the chapter were arrested on a raft of charges. Weeks later, Sarah stood outside the hospital, not as a patient but as a survivor. The physical wounds were healing. The psychological ones would take longer. The door opened behind her and Leo stepped out, duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He'd quit his job. "You ready to get out of here?" he asked, his voice soft. She looked at the building that had been her prison and her battlefield, then back at the man who had been her unlikely ally, her protector, and now, something infinitely more. A slow smile touched her lips, the first real unburdened smile in what felt like a lifetime. "Yeah," she said, taking his hand. The touch was no longer about support or stolen moments of passion. It was about a future. "I'm ready." They walked away from the shadow of the hospital, 2 broken people made whole by each other, stepping out of the darkness and into the waiting light of a new day. The empire hadn't fully crumbled, but its most insidious weapon had been dismantled. For Sarah and Leo, that was victory enough. It was the promise of a life built not on fear, but on the quiet, steadfast certainty of the man whose hand was firmly holding hers. The rooftop was a cacophony of shouted commands, the squawk of radios and the distant, beautiful wail of sirens growing from a chorus to a symphony. Sarah stood shivering, wrapped in a coarse FBI blanket that did nothing to stop the tremors racking her body. They weren't from the cold night air, but from the seismic aftershock of staring into the void. The cold, dark barrel of Dr. Evans' silenced pistol. She watched as the man who had sworn an oath to heal her was forced to his knees. The polished facade of Dr. Alistair Evans, society darling and surgical rock star, shattered like glass under the brute force of the zip ties cinched around his wrists. The sight wasn't just an arrest. It was the breaking of a powerful, malevolent spell. Leo was at her side in an instant, his arm a solid, warm bar around her shoulders, pulling her away from the scene and towards the rooftop access door. His body was a trembling wall between her and the nightmare, but it was a wall that held firm. An agent in a windbreaker with FBI stenciled on the back gently guided her downstairs. away from the chilling wind and the flashing lights that painted the scene in strokes of emergency. The next few hours were a blur of sterile interrogation rooms, scratchy wool blankets, and cups of terrible lukewarm coffee that tasted like salvation. She gave her statement again and again, her voice growing hoarse, the story of the alley, the accident, the nod, and the photos becoming a rote recitation that slowly leached the immediate terror from the memory. Leo was always there, in the next room, their separate testimonies weaving together to form an unbreakable chain of evidence. The audio recording from the fake plant in Evans's office was the undeniable smoking gun, but it was Leo's desperate, brilliant bluff about the live streaming camera that had truly shattered their composure. His old college roommate, Paul, wasn't FBI. He was a graphic designer in Ohio who was probably asleep. But the mere suggestion timed with the perfectly orchestrated police arrival, a result of an anonymous, panicked text Leo had managed to send from his phone during the chaotic chase through the elevator shaft, had been enough to make Evans and Thorne hesitate. And in their world, hesitation was a death sentence. It was dawn by the time they were released, the city stirring to life, bathed in the soft, hopeful pink and gold of a new day, blissfully ignorant of the festering darkness that had just been carved out of its heart. A female agent with kind eyes drove them to a quiet, nondescript hotel, a temporary safe house that felt like a palace. The silence in the car was heavy, thick with the unspoken weight of all they had endured and the terrifying, wide-open future that now lay before them. The hotel room was generic, beige, and blessedly, profoundly anonymous. The door clicked shut with a sound of immense finality, and for the first time in weeks, they were truly, completely alone. No threats, no prying eyes, no beeping monitors counting down the seconds to a manufactured death. Just the faint, steady hum of the air conditioner and the sound of their own breathing sinking in the quiet. Sarah stood in the middle of the room, hugging herself, her arms wrapped around the scrubs she still wore. Now that the adrenaline had faded, a profound exhaustion settled deep into her bones, a leaden weight in her very marrow. But beneath it, a nervous, jittery energy buzzed just under her skin. She was free, but she didn't know how to be free yet. The cage was gone, but her wings were still clipped, her muscles atrophied from disuse. Leo watched her, his usual cynicism burned away in the fire on the roof, replaced by a quiet, watchful tenderness. "You should try to get some sleep," he said, his voice rough with a fatigue that went deeper than physical exhaustion. "I don't think I can," she whispered, the words sounding too loud in the stillness. "Every time I close my eyes, I'm back on that roof. I can feel the wind. I can see the gun." He didn't answer with empty platitudes. He simply crossed the room, the few feet feeling like a chasm he was desperate to close, and took her face in his hands. His touch was infinitely gentle, a stark, healing contrast to the brutal grip of fear that had held her for so long. He leaned in and kissed her, and this kiss was nothing like the desperate, hungry one they'd shared in the hospital, or the fierce, promising one after their first dinner. This was slow, deep, and full of a profound, aching relief. It was a silent vow of safety, a seal on the promise that the fight was truly finally over. When they finally broke apart, breathless and trembling for a new reason, he rested his forehead against hers, their breath mingling. "You're safe now, Sarah," he murmured, his voice a low, sure vibration against her skin. "I've got you. No one is ever going to hurt you again." Tears she hadn't known she was holding back finally spilled over, hot and silent, tracing paths through the grime still smudged on her cheeks. They weren't tears of fear anymore, but of release, a great damning pressure finally breaking inside her. He held her as she cried, his arms a strong, secure harbor after a relentless, unforgiving storm. He didn't try to shush her or tell her it was okay. He just let her fall apart, knowing with a certainty that shook him to his core that he would be there to help piece her back together, stronger and more beautiful than before. Later, after long, steaming showers that washed away the lingering smell of hospital antiseptic, rooftop grit, and pure terror, they lay together in the dim room, curled under the crisp, impersonal hotel sheets. Her head was pillowed on his chest, the steady, strong rhythm of his heartbeat a lullaby against her ear, slowly syncing with her own. His fingers traced slow, absent-minded patterns on her back, carefully skirting the bandages that still covered her healing ribs, each touch a whispered promise. "Tell me," she said softly. The words muffled against his skin. "You said you were too late once before. What happened?" He was silent for so long she thought he had fallen asleep, or that the wall had gone back up. His hand stilled on her back. "Her name was Jennifer," he finally said, the name a sacred, painful ghost in the room. "My younger sister. She was all light, you know. Just pure, stupid, wonderful light. She got mixed up with the wrong guy, someone on the fringes of a crew like Thorns. I saw the signs, the bruises she tried to cover with makeup, the way she jumped at loud noises, the fear in her eyes that she thought she could hide from her big brother." His voice cracked, a fissure of old, deep-set pain. "I told her to leave him. I begged her. I threatened the guy. She said she would. She promised. I was complacent. I thought I had time to make her see reason, that my anger was enough to scare him off." He took a ragged breath. "I was at work reevaluating a rotator cuff when I got the call. A hit and run. Tragic accident. They never found the driver. I knew. I always knew." Sarah tightened her arms around him, holding him as if she could physically absorb some of the decades-old pain. "Oh, Leo. I became a physical therapist because I thought I wanted to help people put their bodies back together," he murmured into her hair, his voice thick. "But I think I was really just trying to put myself back together, to atone. When I saw you, when I heard your story and saw that same look of trapped, terrified light in your eyes, I saw a chance to finally keep a promise I failed to keep a long time ago. I couldn't be too late again. I wouldn't survive it." Now she understood. The source of his fierce, unwavering protectiveness wasn't just chivalry, it was redemption. The deep well of pain that fueled his sarcastic exterior was a memorial. He hadn't just been saving her. He'd been saving a part of himself he thought was lost forever with Jennifer. "You saved me, Leo," she whispered, lifting her head to look at him. In the half-light, his face was all sharp, beautiful angles and soft shadows, a map of his pain and his strength. "In every way it's possible to save a person. You saved my life, my sanity, my future." His eyes, those blue-green pools she had learned to trust with her very soul, searched hers. The charge between them was no longer just the spark of survival or stolen moments of passion. It was deeper, more profound, an unbreakable tether. It was the foundation of something real and enduring, built in the crucible of shared trauma and unwavering loyalty. He kissed her again, and this time it was a culmination. It was slow and deliberate, a tender, reverent exploration that spoke of a future, not just an escape from the past. His hands, so skilled and sure in their therapy, were now worshipful as they mapped the landscape of her body, carefully, lovingly avoiding her injuries, celebrating the life that still thrummed so vibrantly beneath her skin. There were no words as they came together in the quiet dimness. The world narrowed to the feel of his skin, warm and alive against hers. The sound of his ragged, loving breaths, the way he looked at her as if she were the most precious, resilient thing he had ever beheld. It was not an act of frantic passion, but one of deep, soul-deep connection. A silent language of healing, gratitude, and a hope so bright it threatened to eclipse all the darkness that had come before. It was the final, definitive step out of the shadows, a physical affirmation that they were alive, they were together, and they were free to love without the specter of death hanging over them. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, limbs entangled, the world felt new, scrubbed clean. The beige walls of the hotel room no longer seemed anonymous, but like a blank canvas upon which they could paint any future they dared to dream. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice soft and full of wonder, her finger tracing the strong, beloved line of his jaw. He captured her finger, pressing a kiss to its tip. "Now," he said, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that promised forever, "we live. We take it one sunrise at a time. We find an apartment with too many windows and a ridiculous amount of light. We get a dog, a big goofy one that hogs the bed. We have lazy Sunday mornings with coffee and the crossword. We burn toast and laugh about it. We do all the ordinary, boring, magnificent things we almost never got to do." It sounded like heaven, a simple, complicated, beautiful heaven. The weeks and months that followed were a journey of slow, steady, deliberate healing. They found a small, sun-drenched apartment on the other side of the city, with a view of a park and a kitchen big enough for two. Sarah's physical therapy continued, but now it was in a bright, cheerful clinic with a therapist Leo trusted implicitly. The sessions were no longer about surviving the next hour, but about truly living, regaining strength for hikes they wanted to take in the mountains, for a future they were actively, joyfully building together, brick by brick. The trial of Alistair Evans and Marcus Thorne was a media circus, a sprawling spectacle of corruption and violence that captivated the nation. But they faced it as they faced everything else. Together, their hands linked under the table, their testimonies calm and unwavering, were the nails in the coffin. Evans, the brilliant surgeon, and Thorne, the ruthless kingpin, were both sentenced to multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole, along with several of their key lieutenants. The Hells Angels empire in the city didn't crumble to dust. Such ancient, venomous creatures always had more heads. But it was dealt a mortal blow, its influence shattered, its most dangerous weapon neutralized. It retreated into the shadows, fractured and weakened, a ghost of its former self. One evening, nearly a year after the rooftop, Sarah stood on the balcony of their apartment, wrapped in a thick sweater, watching the city lights begin to twinkle like earthbound stars in the twilight. The air was crisp with the promise of autumn. Leo came out and stood behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her back against his chest, his chin resting on her head. She leaned into him, a perfect, comfortable, eternal fit. "You know," he said, his voice a soft, contented rumble against her ear, "I was thinking, we never really had a proper first date. It was all just near-death experiences and criminal conspiracies." She laughed, a genuine, free, melodic sound that still felt like a small miracle to them both. "What did you have in mind, Mr. Miller? How about dinner? Tomorrow night? Somewhere with terrible romantic lighting, overpriced wine, and absolutely no hospital food or armed gunmen." She turned in his arms, looping her hands around his neck, her eyes shining with a love so profound it sometimes stole his breath. "I think that sounds absolutely perfect." He smiled, that real, unguarded, heart-stopping smile that was meant only for her. He kissed her, slow and sweet, under the vast star-dusted canvas of the sky. They had walked through fire and emerged not unscarred but unbroken, their love forged in the hottest flames and tempered by the unyielding will to survive and to live. The past was a ghost, a faded photograph in a closed album. Their future was a brilliant, sprawling promise, written in the light of 1,000 city stars. A testament to the fact that sometimes the most extraordinary, enduring love stories are born not in ease, but in the darkest of places, between two people who chose to be each other's light. Thank you for watching. Can you ever truly trust the people sworn to protect you? If this story had your heart pounding, subscribe for more tales of dangerous secrets and shocking betrayals. Where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below.